Welcome to the Hemlock State Explorer. It is a beautiful midwinter day, and what better way to spend it than exploring outdoor adventure and fascinating history. Today we're at a location that has an abundance of both. Rock Run in Susquehanna State Park of Harford County, Maryland. Rock Run was at one time a bustling commercial hub, as is attested to by that massive 4-story stone grist mill, state-of-the-art in its day, and the mansion behind us. Much of its success is attributed to its location at the convergence of the Susquehanna Tidewater Canal and the bridge right before you that crossed over the Susquehanna River. We'll take a closer look at all of that. There's so much to see and explore here. Before we visited, we hopped on the Rock Run website, which has a walking tour full of details and the historic significance of each of these structures and locations that we'll share with you. And of course, you can find all of that at hemlockstateexplorer.com. We are at one of the trailheads, and there are multiple trails through the area and places to park. There's a large lot on the other side of the grist mill, and there's also a pull-off alongside the road right at the beginning of the trailhead adjacent to the Susquehanna River. I'm excited to show you this first. Check this out. So just beyond this information kiosk, which has a map and explanation of some of the things to see here. You see these old rails in the road? So we have what would have been the Susquehanna Tidewater Canal to our right, and then an old rail line, which there's actually a trail that heads all the way up to the Stafford Furnace, which we did a piece on. That was a fascinating piece of history. And here's some stairs down to the river. We'll be very careful making our way down. Love the old masonry to either side. It's a bit tricky going with the ice and snow, but here's the Susquehanna River right before us. Those piles of debris are actually piers of an old bridge that crossed over two islands and then the other side of the Susquehanna. Here's a good view of the exposed rails adjacent to a wooden observation deck on the river. And if we walk out, in addition to the glorious views of our beloved Susquehanna, you can clearly see the bridge pillars rather. And then there is the stone stairway that led right down to the river. Oh, what a glorious day to visit. Yes, it is midwinter, but this place is so popular. If you come here in the summer, it's overrun most days. And even on a winter day like this, there are a number of other adventures that we've encountered. We'll pan around. And please pardon any noise that you hear, because it looks like there's some work being done up on the mansion above. While you're enjoying the exploration, we'll narrate from the self-guided tour. The Rock Run grist mill was built by John Stump of Stafford, that is John Stump III, around 1800. A prosperous businessman, Stump owned several mills and plots of land in Harford, Cecil, and Baltimore counties. Following his death in 1816, the mill and surrounding lands passed into the Archer family by the way of Stump's daughter Anne, who married Dr. John Archer, Jr. John Macklem acquired the mill from the Archer family in 1904. Then in 1929, the mill passed to Wilford Wilkinson, who operated the mill until his death in 1954. The Maryland Department of Forest and Parks purchased the mill 6 years later. In 1965, the mill's corn grinding operation was partially restored for public demonstrations. Standing 4 stories tall, the mill was a large building by the standards of 1800. It was a merchant mill, and it ground wheat into flour for both the local and international market. Much of its flour was sold to the Caribbean. The original water wheel would have been made of wood. Even in its earliest configuration, much of the flour milling process was automated, so only a few workers were needed to operate the mill. The building's 34 windows provided most of the mill's interior lighting. Because flour dust is combustible, the mill usually only ran during daylight hours. A center of activity during its heyday, the mill is where local residents bought, sold, and bartered goods. The mill's second floor served as a community post office from 1827 to 1856. The mail windows and boxes still remain in place. Around 1900, the mill was almost completely gutted and rebuilt to its present configuration. The original flour grinding stones were replaced with steel rollers. The traditional millstones continued to grind corn into cornmeal. The mill ceased to grind wheat in the 1930s, but the corn grinding stones operated until 1954. That's fascinating, 154 years of continuous operation. Continuing, the state-of-the-art, at the time, Fitz water wheel was installed in 1900. With 84 buckets, the wheel weighs 12 tons. When water fills the buckets, the wheel rotates. The rotating wheel turns a series of gears, belts, and pulleys to turn the millstone inside the mill. The turning millstone grinds corn into cornmeal. A grain grinding millstone, similar to the one inside the mill, is located across the street. The entrance to the mill is flanked by flint grinding millstones. Constructed between 1801 and 1804, the main purpose of the spring house was to provide drinking water for the Rock Run mansion. Because refrigeration as we know it did not exist, the spring house also served as cold storage for foods that spoil easily. Perishable items were placed in sealed containers and submerged in the 50-degree water, that is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Although this water isn't as cold as our refrigerators, it served its purpose by keeping the food cool. As a side note, our refrigerators typically run between 40 and 42, depending on how you have it set. Continuing, the spring house is a two-story structure with the second floor being accessed around the back of the building on the hillside. The second floor allowed storage for items that benefited from a moist environment. Planks would have been laid in the hillside to the access point. Directly below the spring house at the road is a stone engraved with, quote, "In memory of Joshua Cowgill Smith, 1857 to 1911, end quote. This stone is actually a trough, now embedded in the earth, which housed the water that ran through the spring house. The trough was available for all to enjoy. The carriage barn. There are two different uses for this two-story barn throughout the years. It was built into the hillside to provide direct access to the second floor where food was kept for the animals housed on the first floor. Stalls once occupied the area where the present-day restrooms are located. Later, carriages were housed in the lower level while farm equipment and tools were stored above. The Rock Run, that is Carter Archer Mansion. John Stump of Stafford sold 2 plots of land and a half interest of the mill and the affiliated properties in 1801 to John Carter, former husband of Hannah Stump. In 1804, on the newly purchased land, Carter built the mansion. However, when Carter died in 1805, his share of the mill and the land, including the mansion, was sold in its entirety back to Stump in 1808. Upon Stump's death in 1816, Stump left his daughter Anne and her husband Dr. John Archer Jr. the 1808 land purchase. The property remained in the Archer family until 1904 when it was purchased by John Macklem. Like the mill, the mansion was then passed to Wilford Wilkinson in 1929. Then it was purchased by the State Department of Forests and Parks in 1960. The L-shaped house contains 13 rooms and 4 chimneys to accommodate the large family. There are multiple living and dining rooms to distinguish between the formal and family areas. The kitchen was not originally built into the home as it is seen today. According to a local historical architect, the structure was added on within 5 years of the home's construction. The oven and boiler within the kitchen are unique in that both pieces have individual flues, and there are only 2 of these particular ovens, this one included, known in the state of Maryland, serving as a testament to the wealth of the family. Above the kitchen are small living quarters that house the servants of the home. The mill pond. John Stump chose this location to build a mill because Rock Run was ideal for providing water power. When he built the mill, he also constructed a dam which created the mill pond visible behind the dam. When the dam gate is opened, water flows into the mill race to power the mill. In order for water released from the mill pond to reach the mill itself, a race was constructed to control the water flow to the target location. The mill race is a man-made stream that allows water to flow from the dam through the culvert at the driveway to the mansion onto a large dip in the lawn. This dip is known as the holding pond. The water from the mill race accumulates in the holding pond, then travels through the forebay, the iron pipe, and exits onto the wheels buckets turning the wheel. The miller's house. The stone mill built around the same time as the mill was where the miller of the Rock Run mill resided. The miller was not necessarily the mill owner, but was the mill operator. For use of his services, he would take his pottle, or fee, from each bushel ground, which was approximately 1/8 of the bushel. According to oral history, in the mid-1800s, when the Tidewater Canal was in operation, the miller's house doubled as an inn for travelers along the road and the canal. The Jersey Toll House. The first bridge to span the Susquehanna River in Maryland opened in this spot in 1817. Remains of the bridge's piers are still visible in the Susquehanna River. Built by the same company that operated the bridge, the Jersey Toll House served as both a toll collection station and a residence for the toll keeper. The porch window was used by the toll keeper to watch for boats coming down the canal as bridge travelers were entering and exiting the bridge. The bridge was washed away in 1856, and the toll keeper was no longer needed. More information about the bridge can be found on the toll house porch. When Wilford Wilkinson bought the mill in 1929, he rented out the toll house to the head of his fishing business. The toll house was acquired by the state in 1960. At the toll house, we learned more about the bridge that crosses the Susquehanna River at Rock Run. It reads, "The Susquehanna Bridge and Banking Company began construction in 1813 and opened the bridge in 1818, connecting Harford and Cecil counties. The bridge was covered to protect the wood decking and trusses from damage by the sun, rain, and snow, but many other dangers threatened destruction. After a fire in 1823, reported to have been caused by a spark from a sleigh runner, the bridge was not open again until 1828. Then in 1854, vibrations, which were set in motion by a herd of cattle being driven across the bridge, brought down one span. A ferry once again operated between the two spans while the bridge was repaired. Finally, during a storm in 1856, ice floes carried away much of the bridge and it was never rebuilt." The Susquehanna and Tidewater Canal. This ditch is a remnant of the Susquehanna and Tidewater Canal, which ran 45 miles from Havre de Grace, Maryland to Wrightsville, Pennsylvania. Opened in 1840, the canal was originally 15 to 20 feet wide and 6 to 12 feet deep. The canal's 29 locks together raised boats from 20 feet above sea level at Havre de Grace to 1,000 feet at Wrightsville. The granite locks were about 150 feet long by 18 feet wide. 9 of these locks were in Maryland, and remnants of 3 are within the park. Some of the stonework is still visible today. Each stone weighs at least 1 ton. One of the locks is near the Lapidum boat launch, and a second is just south where Deer Creek meets the Susquehanna River. Canal boats were pulled by mules. A boat moving upriver would be pulled into a lock, and the gates behind the boat would be closed to allow the water to rise until the boat reached the depth to continue traveling up the canal. The Susquehanna and Tidewater Canal prospered in the mid-1800s, but was eventually bypassed by railroads. It closed in the early 1900s. Ironically, railroad tracks were laid on the canal towpath in the mid-1920s to deliver materials to build the Conowingo Dam. Most of the old canal upriver from the dam is under Conowingo Lake. The advantage of visiting Rock Run during the winter is that you get to avoid the crowds that are typically present during the spring, summer, and fall. And there certainly are crowds, which is a testimony of how great this destination is. But the disadvantage is that the historic buildings are not open like how they are during the season, and the mansion was undergoing roofing work, so we couldn't get terribly close to it. But Lord willing, we plan on a return trip to share this with you during the nicer weather when everything is open. Also, just a few miles up the road is Stafford Flint Furnace, and you can find that along with all of our other adventures at hemlockstateexplorer.com. Thanks for joining us, and we can't wait to see you on the next adventure.